Good day, children. Today I am here to take a chapter from Political Science, Chapter 3, Electoral Politics. This particular chapter has two videos, Video 1 and Video 2. Video 1 consists of importance of democratic institutions and political competition, and Video 2 consists of what makes the election in India democratic. So this chapter is all about election. We know in a democratic country, it is through election we elect the representatives. So in this chapter, we are going to learn about what is election, the different process of election, and how these representatives are elected in a democratic system like India. So let us start with the first video. Now, in the first video, we just asking you how and why do we elect the representatives. As we are all aware, democracy is of the people, by the people, and for the people. And in a democratic country, everyone has an equal right to vote. Different parties and candidates contest freely, and voters have a right to choose their representatives at regular intervals. So, before we continue the chapter, I'll let you know what you mean by election. It is a process by which people choose their representative at regular intervals is known as election. I repeat, the process by which people choose their representatives at regular intervals is known as election. And in the democratic countries, the preferred contestant is elected. Whichever candidate gets the majority vote gets elected, and it has to go through a lot of process. The next slide tells you what makes an election democratic, how an election becomes democratic. We are all aware of the concept universal adult franchise. That is, the person who has acquired the age of 18 and above is given the right to vote. So everyone who is an adult should be able to choose, means everyone should have one vote, and every vote should have equal value, which we term it as universal adult franchise. And we understand that the next step is there should be parties and candidates to choose from. We are aware India has a multi-party system, many parties, and there are many candidates who stand for election from each of these parties, and the people who is 18 years of age or who is an adult chooses from these candidates. The best among them will be elected, and elections are held at regular intervals. Mostly, as we know, elections are held within within 5 years, every regular intervals, every 5 years. Then candidates preferred by the people should be elected. Candidates preferred by the people, they are elected. Then elections should be held in a free and fair atmosphere. So through these steps we understand that it makes an election democratic. I repeat, how or what makes an election democratic? It is through universal adult franchise. Then there should be parties and candidates to choose from. Then elections must be held at regular intervals, and the candidates preferred by the people are elected, and the elections must be held in free and fair atmosphere. So we understand that there is competition happening within the political parties. There is competition. The obvious form of competition is among the political parties. If there is no competition, election will become pointless. So, is it good to have political competition? Whether it is good to have political competition? To an extent we agree to the fact that competition is necessary. So we can look into the next slide where it speaks about the demerits of political competition as well as the merits of political competition. Now look at the demerits of political competition. It creates a sense of disunity and party politics. Creates a sense of disunity because there is political competition happening within the political parties. So there is a chance of disunity and party politics. Parties and leaders, they level allegations against one another by using dirty tricks to win election. That is, in order to win the election, the different political parties, they are using dirty tricks so they could have maximum number of votes so that they can win the election. Then the pressure to win electoral fights does not allow sensible long-term policies to be formulated. To mean to say that at present, whichever political party or whichever government is ruling, they might have formulated a policy for the betterment of the citizen. But after 5 years, whichever political party rules, not necessary to continue these policies for the next 5 years. But remember, in order to get the result of any formulated policy, we need a long term, many years. We need many years in order to get the result of the formulated policy. So sometimes it happens that these policies, they will not be continued for the next government. So these are some of the demerits of political competition. Now let's look into the merits of political competition. Elections are good because they force the ruling party to perform, because we know there is always a party who is ruling and there is also opposition party. The opposition party, they act as the watchdog. They check whether the ruling party is ruling properly. If not, they criticize the ruling party. The opposition party criticize. So naturally, they are forcing the ruling party to perform better. Then it forces parties and leaders to serve the people. So naturally, only if they serve properly and if they perform properly, they can continue for the next fifth year or the next election. They will only win if they work properly and if they perform properly, only then for the next they can win in the next election. So we understand that there is both demerits and merits of political competition. Now let's look into the system of elections in India. System of elections in India. Now when we go in detail about the system of elections in India, we understand we have general election, we have mid-term election, then we have by-election. Now we will go in detail what is general election. What is general election? An election is carried out every 5 years in the Lok Sabha or in the Vidhan Sabha, which we call it as general election. Every 5 years. Elections are carried out in every 5 years. That is what we mean by general election. Now, what about mid-term election? Mid-term election is the Lok Sabha and the Vidhan Sabha are dissolved and an election is held before the expiry of their full term of 5 years. That is, due to some reason they are not able to, or the ruling party is not able to complete their term of tenure. Before that, an election happens. Such an election we call it as mid-term election. Now, what is by-election? That is, an election may need to be held for a single constituency due to the death or resignation of an elected member. So the election is carried out to fill this vacancy. That is what we mean by by-election. That is, an election may be held for a single constituency. For what reason? Due to the death or resignation of an elected member. This we call it as the by-election. Now, let's look into the different stages of election system in India. The different stages. Let's look into the different stages. The first stage we call it as the electoral constituencies. Electoral constituencies. What you mean by electoral constituency? That is, we understand the country is divided into different areas for the purpose of election. These areas we call it as constituency. Different areas. Okay, we divide in the different places in different areas for the purposes of election. This is what we mean by constituency. So, for Lok Sabha elections, the constituency or the country is divided into 543 constituencies, and the representative elected from each constituency, we call it as the Member of Parliament or MP. So, in the Lok Sabha elections, we have around 543 constituencies, and the person who is elected from these constituencies is called the Member of the Parliament or the MP. likewise in state. In state, the state is divided into specific number of assembly constituencies, and the person who is elected from these constituencies, we call it as the member of legislative assembly, or MLA, member of legislative assembly. Likewise, we have constituencies in villages or towns, or these constituencies in villages and towns, we call it as a ward. And that these wards are acting as constituencies, which we call it as seats, SEATS. So this is what you mean by electoral constituencies. That is, the whole area, the whole country is being divided into small areas or small parts. These parts we call it as, or these small areas we call it as constituencies. So the member who is elected from the Lok Sabha for the election purpose, we call it as MPs, and in a state we call it as MLA, and from the local village and the town we say it is ward or the seat. Then we must also know there is reserved constituencies. There are certain constituencies which is reserved for certain communities. Like there are some constituencies which are reserved for people who belong to scheduled caste. The scheduled caste, in a scheduled caste reserved constituency, only someone who belongs to the scheduled caste can stand for election. So naturally, who will be winning there? A scheduled caste. The representative will be a scheduled caste. Likewise, we have constituencies reserved for scheduled tribe. So that particular constituency is exclusively for the candidate, that is the tribal communities, the member from a tribal area. And then we must understand that the people who are elected from the scheduled caste and the scheduled tribe, it is they who can tell properly what are their wants, what is necessary for the improvement of their community or their area. So that is why we have reserved constituencies for scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. So currently in the Lok Sabha we have 84 seats are reserved for scheduled caste and 47 for scheduled tribes. Okay, I hope it is clear. Currently in Lok Sabha 84 seats which is reserved for scheduled caste and 47 for scheduled tribes. Now next let us look into what you mean by voters list. That is, the people who are eligible to vote. The people who are eligible to vote, they are being put under a list. They have prepared, the government prepares a list to who all can vote. So this is what officially we call it as electoral roll or the voters list. Then naturally we are aware who can vote in India. The citizens who are aged 18 years of age and above can vote in an election. So it means that everyone should have one vote and each vote should have equal value. So naturally, once you are 18 years of age, it is the responsibility of the government to make sure their names comes in this voters list. Then A complete revision of this list takes place every 5 years. Every 5 years they make sure that the list is revised, and the government, it is the responsibility of the government to give a photo, that is election photo identity card, that is EPIC, election photo identity card, EPIC, to every person in the voters list. And the voters who have got the election photo identity card is required to carry this card when they go for vote. When they go to the polling booth, they are supposed to carry this election photo identity card. If not, it is not possible for them to vote. So this is with respect to the voters list. Now let us look into nomination of candidates. That is, anyone who can be a voter can also become a candidate in the election. I repeat, anyone who can be a voter can also become a candidate in the election. But in order to be a candidate, the minimum age is 25 years. Okay? Then what happens? Political parties, they nominate their candidates who get the party symbol and support. So whosoever is nominated, the candidates get the party symbol and support. And party's nomination is often called party ticket. So naturally, when the party's ticket, that is a person who gets the party's ticket, that particular person is nominated, and only then this particular person can contest election. Then every person who wishes to contest an election has to fill a nomination form. The person who has got the party ticket has to fill a nomination form, and also will have to give some money as a security deposit, some money to security deposit. Only then this particular person can stand as a candidate, that is the nominated candidate. Then at present we have a new system of declaration has to be declaration has been introduced. That is, this declaration is directed by the Supreme Court of India. What it is, that is, every candidate has to make a legal declaration, or this candidate must give full details of his, that is, whether there is serious criminal cases pending against the candidate, then the details of the assets and the liabilities of the candidates and his or her family, then education qualification of the candidate. All these things has to be declared. This declaration has to be given to the Supreme Court. This is what we call it as the nomination of candidate. Then after the nomination, next we have the election campaign. These candidates, they start campaigning. What you mean by campaigning? That is, campaigns, it takes place for a 2-week period, between the announcement of the final list of candidates and the date of polling. So 2 weeks are given to these candidates to speak to the people. They can conduct meetings. The political leaders can address. Election meetings are held, and political parties thus mobilize their supporters, and this 2 weeks they can utilize. They can tell the candidates, who am I, to which political party I am standing, what I want or what I am as a person going to do for you all. So this happens, this campaign happens for a particular period of 2 weeks. Then there are laws, there are a lot of laws for campaigning. That is, according to our election law, no party or candidate can, that is, the candidate has to follow certain rules and regulations. They have to follow certain laws. What are the different laws? The candidate or the political party cannot bribe or threaten the voters. They cannot bribe or threaten the voters. Second one, cannot appeal to them in the name of caste or religion. Cannot say that, see, I belong to this particular caste, so you cannot go and ask the vote in the name of caste or religion. Then next, use government resources for election campaigns, like vehicles, government money. They cannot use the government resources for election campaign. Then they can only spend, that is, spend more than rupees 25 lakhs in a constituency for a Lok Sabha election. For the Lok Sabha election, they cannot spend more than 25 lakhs for a constituency. And for rupees 10 lakh in an assembly election, cannot spend more than 10 lakhs in an assembly election. So these are the rules that the candidates has to follow during the campaigns. Next we have polling and counting votes. So naturally now, after 2 weeks, no more campaign. Now we have to wait for the day to cast the vote. So we go for polling. That is, the final stage of an election is the day when the voters cast or poll their vote on the election day. That is, on the election day, the voters, they go for voting. So they go to the polling booth to cast their vote, where there is every voter go to the polling booth, go stand there, you got to be in queue, and there is an identifying officer who identifies the voter. Then a mark is put on the finger, and then the voter is allowed to cast the vote. I repeat, the final stage is the voting day, where the voter goes to the polling booth to cast the vote, where the identifying officer identifies the voter, then puts a mark on the finger, then allows her to cast the vote. And we cast the vote. Where do we cast the vote? We cast the vote in electronic voting machine, EVM, electronic voting machine. And this machine shows the names of the candidate and the symbol of the party. It is all marked there. The symbol is also given. Then you have the candidate's name is also written there, and in each of their names you have small black buttons or small switches given there. So to whomsoever you agree, to whichever political party you agree, you need to press the button and you have voted or you have cast your vote. And once the polling is over, all the electronic voting machine, EVM, is sealed, and on a fixed day, date, all the EVMs are open and the votes, they start counting the votes. And within a few hours or a day, all the results are declared and it becomes clear who will form the government, which political party will come to power. So this is what we mean by polling and how the votes are counted. I hope all the process of election or the different stages of election is clear to all, and if you have any doubt, you can clear your doubt with your respective subject teachers during the Google Meet. Thank you and have a great day.